Good evening and welcome to the 31st meeting of fiscal year 2024 for the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I'd like to now call the meeting to order and begin by introducing the members of the board. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Maggie.
Maggie Oldfield, member.
Jim.
Jim Davis, member.
Cheryl.
Cheryl Tagaya, secretary.
Sean.
Sean Fahey, member.
And myself, Meredith Hall, serving as chair. And this evening, our staff, Tim.
Tim Zerwinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
And Julia.
Julia Getman, clerk.
Great, thank you all. And we also have Sean Reardon, who is our peer review consultant, joining us this evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Great, thank you, Sean. So the first item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Cheryl did send out a set from March 28th, which was a revised set of edits, and I just haven't had a chance to review those yet. So if we could make a motion to defer those.
Meredith, we also had the 14th, which were sent last week. Did everyone get a chance to look at those?
Yeah.
I haven't. I'm okay with them.
I'm fine with the 14th.
I'm fine with the 14th.
Me too. Good on the 14th, but I need another week on the more current meeting minutes.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the March 14th meeting minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Cheryl,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Maggie,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Great. And then we will defer the vote on the minutes for the March 28th. Now, discussion of the next meeting dates. Julia has kindly reserved a room on May 6th for an organizational meeting. Is that at 7 p.m., Julia?
I haven't, I think Lynn did it, so she takes the credit for that. But I think it's usually 6:30 or maybe 7 o'clock because the town meeting starts at 7:30, so it's usually 7 o'clock.
7, that's what I thought. So,
but it can be any time, really.
Okay, does anyone have a preference? Probably, because I think it will just, based on the election organizational discussion for the board. So is 7 p.m. sufficient for everyone? Since we really don't have anything on there. Okay. Okay. So the next meeting that will be posted is May 6th at 7 p.m. And then that will be followed by a May 9th meeting and a May 23rd, our regular scheduled meetings.
Meredith, just in terms of the 6th, we have town meeting on the 6th as well, right?
Yes. So that would just be a pre-town meeting.
I understand. Okay.
So we'll, Tim and Julia, if you can just send out the location of that room, confirm with Lynn and just send that out to the board.
Sure.
So everyone knows where to meet. Great. So the next, so those were the meeting dates. And then Tim, we just have Director of Planning and Community Development update.
Thanks, Meredith. So I had sent out something a little bit earlier, something that the town administrator has been kind of cooking up regarding some economic development planning that his office is looking to spearhead. I forget if it was this most recent fiscal year or the previous fiscal year. We had gotten an earmark in the state budget for general economic development activities. Which could kind of run the gamut from anything you can imagine. And I think after kind of a lot of deliberation, the town administrator, decided that we've done a lot of housing planning via obviously our housing production plan from a few years ago, and then obviously the MBTA communities effort. There's been a lot of discussion around housing and zoning around that sort of thing. A little bit less attention on kind of the town's economic development policy. And so this is something that MAPC has done in other towns. Marshfield was a really good example of an economic development plan that they've done recently. Just really starting to think about, again, we're in town meeting season. We're all having discussions about the budget, whether or not we're going to have an override, whether it's last year or this year or next year. And so, the idea of, what policies do we have to, raise revenue and kind of foster a more robust and vibrant kind of, commercial economy in the town. And so, we solicited MAPC for a proposal, something that the select board is interested in. They approved the proposal from MAPC at their meeting last week. There is a, just in terms of, and having done these plans, yourselves and having seen them in action, the consultants like to have a kind of a public body to be checking in with and kind of direct activities. The select board is, as far as I know, kind of agnostic on that. In terms of, which is the public board. Ultimately, they'll want to kind of, have a role in it in terms of a final, approval. But the notion was similar to some other initiatives that we've done. The bike plan was an example. In terms of things that have an overlap between select board and planning board kind of interests. Whether the master plan implementation committee would be kind of able to kind of slot into that role, given both their kind of dual nature and also the planning board's full plate with MBTA communities, which we're still working on. So that was something that this meeting was kind of a slot-in meeting. This is something that I wanted to kind of get on the agenda for next week to just talk a little bit more, give you all some time to take a look at that proposal, see what your interest is in terms of, your involvement. Whether that's something that, you'd be comfortable with MPIC picking up, whether you want to kind of propose, a greater role for the planning board. It's really something that, again, this is an initiative that the town administrator's office is spearheading, but also, we want to make sure that, there's buy-in from everybody, and that it's something that, we're using all of the resources in town to kind of, spread the word and get people involved. So I know I sent that out, just today. You might have had a good chance to look at it, but, assuming, assuming it's all right with the chair, whoever the chair is, understanding we're gonna have a reorganization. We'd like to talk about it in just a little bit more detail next week, and just kind of see, what the board's temperature is on their involvement. But it's something that is kind of explicitly non-housing oriented. I think, we've been having that debate for a long time. We're going to continue to have it as we work through MBTA communities, but wanted to talk through, what are some other things that we can do to kind of create a more vibrant kind of commercial economy, and expand the commercial tax base, which I think is something that everyone tends to be interested in, especially this time of year. So that's that. Cheryl looks like she has a hand up.
Yeah, because that is a question that I had, that I know it's on the agenda for MPIC on the 1st, I believe. And it was disappointing to know that it was going directly to MPIC prior to going to the planning board. And it's not on our agenda. It should be on the May 9th agenda. But Cheryl, I'll let you go ahead and speak to this, please.
Yes, well, it was an item that we were asked to put on the agenda. We have an upcoming meeting next week, so we can defer it if you prefer, if the board prefers to defer it until after our board discusses. Our meeting is intended to be fairly short this week. We have another meeting coming up on May 13th.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we can certainly do that. And this isn't, if you take a look at the proposal, which again, it went out today. I don't expect people to have read it. But there's a sort of a TBD, a to be determined in terms of, who's going to be the public board that, hosts a kickoff meeting and gets kind of these periodic updates. So like I said, this is something that the select board has been, again, kind of doesn't have super strong feelings on. So this isn't like, I don't think anyone's trying to shut out the planning board. It's just, MPIC had a meeting coming up, and then there's another agenda the next week for the planning board. You know, it'll be up to the select board to decide. Again, like they didn't express any strong feelings about it. If the planning board, you know, wants to have some measure of involvement, you know, it's certainly your prerogative to you know, to talk to the select board about that, and to kind of make the pitch. You know, and I think that, you know, if that's something the board's interested in, I'm sure that's something that, you know, we can, you know, put that into the proposal, you know, get that into the final language for the contract, and kind of, you know, figure out an organizational kind of procedure for that. So it really is just kind of a timing thing. I apologize if there's any kind of, you know, anything about that, but you know, just again, if you look at the proposal, you'll see, you know, it's a relatively small part of the proposal, and it is intentionally left, you know, up in the air, so that we could have a little bit of time to figure out, you know, who wants to kind of carry the ball on this one.
Yeah, so I did read through it today, and I sort of did have a couple thoughts. I did think that this was sort of in the lane of the planning board. And I kind of was a little surprised to see that it was going to MPIC. And I thought it was interesting that MPIC was sort of gonna take the role, because this is a really big initiative, and MPIC is an appointed body, it's not an elected body. So I just, you know, thought that this was kind of giving MPIC a little bit too much power. So I think it really should, stay with the planning board first, and then, of course, you know, work alongside, the select board, you know, whenever, it's necessary. So my pitch would be for it to stay, with the planning board first.
Yeah, and I think, Maggie, it's a well taken point. I just want to be clear. I mean, you know, the agenda item, you know, that I had asked Cheryl to put on for her meeting, for MPIC, you know, this week was, you know, we're we're not having an informational meeting right now. This is just a staff update. But basically the pitch, like, you know, here's a plan. You know, you know, the town administrator's office has kind of solicited this proposal. You know, we think that there's a role potentially for MPIC here. I think there's also a role for the planning board. So it wasn't like we're giving this to MPIC. It's here's something, let's talk about what we think you know, this particular committee's role could be. You know, I think we intend on having that same conversation with the planning board. So, you know, I think there's still time for that. You know, we'll get it on the agenda next week, and have a little bit more of a robust conversation. Maggie, I'm glad you're such a voracious reader. But everyone hopefully will have a week to kind of digest the
I'm
proposal.
off on Mondays.
Oh yeah, well,
Mondays off. I get
there you go.
But it just like and also not to take over this conversation, but maybe I just also in the future need a refresher of what the master plan implementation committee actually, what their role is, because I assume just by the very nature of their name, they're the master plan implementation committee. And this is a whole new, they're not implementing anything at this point. It's actually creating. So that's why I was a little confused.
All right, yeah, well, it
Yeah.
should be put on the agenda, and I think we could just plan for that. And Cheryl, I appreciate you allowing the planning board to meet and discuss this prior to.
Meredith, I'm just going to have our committee can I think can just discuss it with no decision to be made. I
Okay.
do want to be clear, for Maggie and for others who might be watching, that they're one of the main sections of the master plan is economic development. And it is something that the committee has had conversation about. So just as the committee has followed up with other initiatives that require follow-up, it is a potential we haven't discussed yet. So I don't know if the interest of the committee is going to feel it's in the right fit either. But I do want to have the conversation because of the connection to the master plan.
Okay. Fair enough. That's great. Okay.
And then one more very, very quick thing, just to kind of put it on your radar. We've been working with Northland Residential to figure out their final two affordable units for the Walcott Woods project. You may recall 54 units down at Walcott Woods. They're responsible for 6 offsite affordable units. We've gotten 4 so far at 2 at 92 Brush Hill Road, 2 at 34 Fairbanks Road. They are in the process of looking at a 2-family on Warren Ave that they think shows promise. That's something I think that the Affordable Housing Trust this week is going to discuss and take a vote on a recommendation. And then we would kind of go through the process of getting those, rehabbed and sold and on our subsidized housing inventory. And at that point, that affordability requirement for Walcott Woods will be satisfied. Great success. Still not a done deal yet, but I think Northland's done a really good job of kind of chasing this down. They've taken that element of the special permit very seriously. And so they've been a good partner in that. So fingers crossed that everything works out, but we're on a good track with that. And we can put that element of the special permit to bed.
That's great. Perfect. Yes. Thank you for that update. And now we can move to our citizens speak. For those of you who would like to speak, we do want to try to limit the amount of time so we can begin going through sort of where we are in the special permit, but certainly welcome to those who would like to speak tonight. See
I'm not
hands.
seeing any hands so far.
Okay. And there will be opportunity during the public hearing to speak. So with that, we can open the public hearing to 111 Highland Street, special permit continued from April 24th, 2024. And we can welcome Ned and his team.
Have found a space in the lunchroom at Town Hall.
Oh, good.
Having thought that the meeting was going to be a combination of live and Memorex. So I trust that the reception here is good enough to participate completely. Could you please let Jesse Alderman, Blaine Buck, Paul Avery, and others, Sashi Meisner, Rebecca, Dylan, in as panelists?
If all those folks could raise their hands, that puts you up to the top of the
Anyone else on our team who I may have neglected to name?
Right. Great. And
that's
sorry we
everybody.
didn't get a reminder out to. Matter of fact, a couple of meetings ago, Sean and I went to town hall and it was on Zoom. So it happens to all of us.
Just a public service announcement. You just always check the agenda, but apologies. I don't think we were certain we would be able to get a room or not. So that wasn't something we were able to kind of pin down at the meeting last week.
No harm, no foul. We're here.
Right. And Ned, while everyone's coming in, I thought we could start by going through the amendments the updates that you've made since we last met. Would that be an appropriate way to start out going through
Sure.
the red line version
After the
of,
special permit.
yes, of the changes?
Tim, if you can share the screen, pull it up.
Yeah.
Give me half a second here. Sorry. Ned, is this NC2 is the most
Yes.
recent one? Okay.
Yes.
Great.
All right, folks, seen it?
Yes.
Now, Ned, had you accepted all of the red line changes from last week?
I had, there are very few additional changes, mostly sort of here, correcting your title at the top.
Is this something we can go ahead and just accept, folks?
I'm
Just
good
shoot
with
down
that.
to number 14 real quick.
All the way down to 14?
Yeah, let's
Oh,
go
I'm
through,
sorry,
let's go through each red line.
Oh, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine. Oh,
So
sorry.
planning and community development, that's good.
We go to the next one. Wait. Got final site plan.
Yeah, I added final in a couple of locations to make it consistent throughout the document.
I'm going to accept these two.
How does the board, I'm fine with that.
Yes,
This is another final site plan.
Mhm.
Can we clarify what that means on 13? I just want to make sure I'm reading that properly. What does that change in the rear parking areas that are there? Are the 18?
This is a change, it's a change that should not have yet have been accepted. It should still read 18 feet. This is a lingering issue. We did a little bit of research. The question was whether we should have 14-foot tall light poles in the rear parking areas, which would require 4 poles, or 2 18-foot poles. We had left it at 18, having adjusted the rest of the light poles to 14, but that was a question that remained after last meeting, and the pleasure of the board is really what's appropriate here.
Are you saying that the option in that rear parking area is 4 poles at 14 feet in height or 2 poles at 18 feet?
Yes. Yeah. We're being told by our lighting consultant that 14 poles, the 14-foot poles won't be 14-foot poles won't be sufficient to cover the parking area.
How does the board feel about that? And is there a preference?
I will state my preference of 4 14-feet poles. I think the fact that you'd have these higher, I think will potentially draw attention to them. And we also have, as we talked about, winter time conditions where you see potential to see the Winter Valley fixtures just beyond this. The reason that you need less is because the higher they go, they can distribute further. And so you're going to have it basically in your view plane a little higher and brighter where they're starting. So when you have 4, they're not going to have to be as bright because they don't have to distribute quite as far. So I just think it'll be a better even distribution of lighting as well.
I agree with Cheryl for the same reasons. Light's better distributed with the 4 poles at 14 than it would be with 2 at 18. And I also like the consistency of 14-foot poles throughout the site. I just I think aesthetically it's better to maintain 14. So I agree with Cheryl. 4 at 14 would be preferable for me.
I'm on board with that as well. I think
Yeah.
18 is just really tall.
Me too. I like the consistency of it.
And I would agree.
Right.
So we'll reject this because this is a change from 14 to 18.
Yep, and we'll go back to 14.
And the plan shows them for 14-foot, or it will show them.
That's right. And then the next change is just for consistency. Most of the language is shall as opposed to will. Just made that change to be consistent.
That's good.
The next change is a modification to language that was in the prior version that the hospital requested to be incorporated. It's substantially the same requirement that the hospital will cooperate with the hospital to come up with a plan to assure appropriate management of commercial deliveries, and that they're consistent with our plans, and that we will meet with the traffic commission and the hospital as necessary to ensure that any recommendations of the traffic commission makes to the select board are consistent with the hospital's plans to manage commercial deliveries and traffic, and the commercial delivery conditions of these permits.
Yeah, that's fine. The part that I had a problem with has been stricken, so it's okay with me.
I'm fine with this revision.
As I am.
Ned,
Yes.
is there more? I understand this is the condition. Is there more to speak to what the hospital's other intentions are?
Yes, they've given me some bullets to present to the board based on some of the work that we'll do in the development of that plan. So with respect to the management actions the hospital will be taking to ensure vendors use Reedsdale Road entry exit and minimize use of ladder streets to and from the hospital. One, they will develop an addendum to commercial delivery contracts for every entry, exit, and route to the hospital, with an emphasis to avoid the ladder streets, similar to the condition that we've agreed to in this permit. Communication operations management plan with commercial delivery operation and drivers to reinforce the importance of this condition and of this plan, and monitoring and periodic monitoring of compliance with the plan. A direct communication channel with neighbors in the town to alert hospital of any infractions, including photographs and complaints for ongoing management and adherence to the policy and the plan. The hospital is open to considering other suggestions from the traffic commission and neighbors, and the hospital is willing to collaborate with neighbors on the ladder streets to address with town committees the cut-through issues that exist. So those are 5 sort of action items that would be incorporated into the plan that would be developed.
So although that series of commitments cannot be made part of the condition, I was hopeful that that would be at least made record, as part of the meeting, even though it's not part of the conditions. And I
can email that to Tim this evening so that that's included in the record. There's no problem with that.
Okay, that's great. Okay.
Could it be added as an exhibit?
No.
No.
So it will be added as an addendum, did you say, Ned?
Yes, whether it would be added, we could add this as an exhibit to the permit. I don't think we can do that. I don't have concurrence of the hospital with respect to them.
So basically it doesn't have any teeth to it. I mean, it's part of the discussion, and I understand that and appreciate that, and we've had a lot of things, part of a discussion, but it's nice to put in, but I don't think it has any teeth to it.
But maybe you can lay down a basis for the hospitals trying to make efforts to keep traffic off the ladder streets. And if and when they come before the town for something else, maybe we can go back to it and say, hey, you said you would do this, and you're doing a great job, and the traffic on the ladder streets has improved, and that's great. Or we can say, look, you're trying to make concessions to alleviate traffic, and you've done nothing.
Yeah,
Maybe good baseline.
Yeah, here's my point of view on it. We're accomplishing as much as we can accomplish with the language that we will have as part of this condition. And the hospital offered those 5 actions that they intend to take, it is the hospital, it's upon them to execute on that. You're right, Maggie, there is no teeth, but there is their standing within the community that I think would motivate Rich, to follow through. He has excellent intentions with what he has outlined, and it's his responsibility as the leader of the hospital to follow through. All the folks that are listening tonight, and I think there are 44 participants, will understand it's going to be a matter of record, and we are going to entrust the hospital that they are sincere, and that although there's no mechanism to have so-called teeth, that they'll follow through. And I have confidence that Rich will.
And can we be sure that those 5 actions get into our minutes at least, so they're documented somewhere?
That's all I was suggesting, is that it's somehow included in the record of the meeting, that this is the commitment that the hospital made. It's not part of the condition, but it is a commitment.
I've just emailed them to Tim.
Beautiful.
Great.
Best we can do, Maggie. I don't think we can accomplish more than that.
I think with the funds that are being deposited in the traffic mitigation fund, and the planning board's approval for use of those funds being required, that we could put a request in that those funds immediately be put to use and develop a traffic study scope of work, which includes working with the hospital, and perhaps if the recommendation, what is in this condition, that they would work with the recommendations of the Traffic Commission, we could ask that they participate through the Traffic Commission in that study. And then some recommendations could come out of that study. So my suggestion is that the board send a letter to the Traffic Commission with its interests in this follow-up and the recommendation for the use of the funds. Then they'll have to come back to us. There's been no expenditure of the funds or any funds from that account yet, so we haven't established a process, but I think this would be a good first project to establish a process for that.
And I think we should also get input from the neighbors on how they would like to see those funds allocated. They may wish to have a speed humps, installed using funds from that. So I just would like to get their input, but I think sending a letter from our board to the Traffic Commission would make sense, but based on getting some additional feedback on whether a traffic study would be most interesting or actual installation of traffic slowing speed humps.
Yeah, and I get all that, but to Sean, to your point, like if BI was really concerned about its standing within our Milton community, then they wouldn't be threatening a 40B if this doesn't go through. So that's my biggest hang up here. So not to belabor a point, any additional language is great, but I'm just still a little skeptical.
All right. Okay. So for now,
I'll
sorry,
accept these changes.
go ahead, Tim.
I
Yeah.
was going to say, should I accept these changes?
Is the board willing to accept those?
Yeah, I'd say
I am.
yes.
Yep.
I am.
This is just an internal reference change, it looks like.
That's correct. Just
Was that it?
That was it.
All right, any other questions? So does anyone have any questions? I should say before I um, discuss a proposed condition that I sent out today. Okay. Yeah, Tim, could you pull up what the language that I had emailed to you today?
Give me half a second. I just want to make
Sure,
sure.
yep, take your time.
Yeah, no. I had a little bit of a problem saving last time, so I want to make sure I'm being fastidious this time.
Yep, absolutely.
I can
No rush.
stop.
Take your time.
Stop my share though. Sorry. Okay, I have that in an email from you. So the email that you sent, Meredith, is the most recent
Yeah.
one. Let me pull that up. And I will share my screen again. All right, can we all see that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so basically, in the all of this process, I have to say, I just am very grateful to the changes that Northbridge has made and all of the improvements, and just really moving through this language and making sure that the best project, that we have the best outcome possible. One of the things and I've mentioned it quite a bit, is my concern in just the process of how it came to the planning board, after the Conservation Commission had already voted on it, and then it came to us, and I believe the Conservation Commission was under the impression that a hydrologist was going to be looking at this site. And when I had requested, and the planning board requested, a hydrogeologist, look at this project, we were told that the Conservation Commission was hiring a hydrogeologist. And then at the end, they found out that it was actually not a hydrogeologist. And I think they had already voted at that point. So this is simply language. And I believe Sean Reardon can talk to this. But essentially, just really making sure the language is as complete and tight, just to protect the neighbors, and just pinpointing and just putting in specific language on, is my understanding, is everything that this project has stated that they would do, that Northbridge has said that they are committed to doing. So this is not different from what they've said. This is just language to give teeth to that and make sure that we, as a planning board, have done everything that we can do to protect the neighbors, and not have any significant adverse effects to the wetlands and to the vernal pools in the neighborhood. But specific to this site, that the water will be properly controlled. So I don't know if folks had a chance to just review this, if we want to, talk about it for a minute. And I'd love to hear from, Sean Reardon as well, because this is just language, again, subject to, if we are going to approve this, I think we need to make sure that we have done everything that we can to just safeguard and protect the
So-
neighbors.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll defer to Sean for the moment, but
Yeah.
the fundamental here is that you're asking us to consider complying with standards that don't exist. That they're based on a current proposed draft of regulatory amendments to the stormwater standards. Those standards don't exist. It would be illegal to impose these standards on us. And what I think you should be doing is relying upon the process that DEP is engaged with, which is a complete review of the stormwater system and the design associated with this property, and that we're going to be bound by. Same
Yeah,
is true
Ned,
with the Superior Court process.
Larry,
If I
let's,
could add a
can I
finer-
let Sean, yeah, I would like Sean Reardon to speak to this, please.
Yeah, my biggest concern is sort of potential conflicts, right? So if DEP does come back with something specific in their decisions, they're going to be based on current stormwater standards. I would hate DEP's decision and your decision to somehow be in conflict. I'm not saying that they will be, but most of the stuff that I see here is duplicative of current standards. But my biggest concern is that to the extent that something is in conflict with what DEP determines, it just creates sort of some, unnecessary tension in something that really probably is not going to return any change in design, but, it will create some sort of tension between the two processes.
So Sean, if we took out the language which are derived from the Mass DEP's current proposed draft language, your understanding is that these items are really they currently exist, these protections.
Yeah, one of the ones that doesn't is the 60%, the phosphorus removal. The 60% phosphorus removal. So that's not in the current standards, but that's something that can only be done by infiltration. So there's some things in here that sort of require additional infiltration. I know the neighborhood's been sort of concerned about groundwater and infiltration on the site. So, that's something that might be an inadvertent negative to these conditions. So I would certainly feel more comfortable staying with the stormwater standards that are currently on record, just to avoid any potential conflicts. And also keep in mind too, the stormwater standards have very robust compliance terms. So, it's very detailed demonstration of compliance. Whereas when we have a sort of a written condition like this, it lacks that, the teeth of the compliance section that the stormwater standards have. So I'm just a little bit concerned about that as well.
Okay, but so again, 1A, that seems fine to you, right?
That's a current requirement. Yep.
No,
Okay.
well, one of the
no, it's
one of
not.
the
If it's
requirements
not
in
cut
there
and
deals
pasted
with-
verbatim from the current stormwater standards, this is preempted by state law.
There's a requirement in here that we'd have to do additional groundwater mounting analysis. That's not a current standard.
She was speaking to A only.
A,
No,
I
that's
was
in-
asking about A.
And here's so Meredith, the issue here is, right, it's like, even if, to Jesse's point, even a change in wording could potentially be a conflict. So the standards are very clear in defining what has to happen in 72 hours. How much groundwater has to be infiltrated in the time you have to do it. So I'm just, from what I see very little added benefit and a lot of added risk in terms of just complication. I think you can be confident that in complying with the current standards, all of the neighbors' concerns are going to be met. And I don't think anything here is going to be a sort of a substantive change to what you're going to end up getting in design.
Okay, I guess,
My fundamental question, Meredith, is why can't you rely on DEP to do its job?
because what I feel is lacking is that, and this condition, and even if it's the last line, through the submission of a report prepared by a qualified scientific experts hydrologist. It's really a hydrogeologist. It's really the subsurface water and soil conditions, which to me have not been clearly fully studied.
Well,
So
I'm
this
not,
would, this would give, excuse me, please don't interrupt. What I'm looking for is protection for the neighborhood, that we make sure that, and there will not be any new testing done, there will not be necessarily to the extent of the studies, which I feel we're lacking in this process. But I would defer, so I guess I'm trying to find a way, and Sean, maybe you can help with this, that we can put some additional language in, and that we do have a proper mounting analysis.
So just one quick thing,
Angelica,
Meredith, if
yeah.
I could. The stormwater standards are explicit. The only people qualified to certify a design compliance with the standards are licensed Massachusetts civil engineers. So requiring anybody else to do that would run contrary to the standards. And the reason for that is hydrology is part of a stormwater design, but it's probably 20% of a stormwater design. There's a lot of other engineering principles that go into designing a fully compliant system. So I would caution sort of substituting a hydrologist for a licensed civil engineer, because there are so many other issues that affect a system design that are not necessarily encompassed in those disciplines. Just for the record, I spoke with Peter Dillon about this project, who is a hydrogeologist from our office, and a very good one that I'm sure some of you folks know, and has worked for the ZBA before. So I have spoken to a hydrogeologist about this project. So it hasn't been sort of silent on that. But just so we're clear, the standards are explicit. The people qualified to certify a stormwater design are civil engineers, not hydrologists or hydrogeologists.
So I'm wondering why the Conservation Commission had asked for that. That John had asked for that, and then later found out that it was not a hydrogeologist. And I'm assuming that referring to underlying soils, which shall be measured in situ saturated hydraulic conductivity tests. I don't think that's been done. Or are you saying DEP will do that?
No, there are standards there are ways in the standards that this testing is supposed to be done, and they did it that way. There are provisions within the standards based on in situ testing, which they did, which are test pits. They have to do test pits in order to substantiate the underlying soil conditions, particularly in their infiltration systems. They did in situ testing, and there are provisions within the guidance documents that allow you, based on the results of that, to select from soil types that have certain hydrogeological and hydrological characteristics. So they did do in situ testing. This isn't blind. They do have guidance within the documents that allow them to draw the conclusions they have. The applicants looked at the mounting analysis. We've looked at the mounting analysis, and I've given the board some background on how I reached my conclusions, that I am 100% confident the mounding will not impact the design of the system or will not break out at the wetland. So I think they've done everything they need to do. The reason the new draft standard has the requirement for doing this work is because it's not always required, as you guys heard earlier, because they have 4 feet of separation. The current standards don't require a mounding analysis. So to your point, had they not been willing to do it, a condition like this would have been reasonable, but they did the analysis and we did the analysis. So, that work has been done. So I feel they've complied with that. But, the new standards eliminate that sort of that relief from having to do anything if you're more than 4 feet of separation. So in fact, if you're going to be using it for pre versus post, they want to make sure that you do a groundwater analysis for that.
Right, thank you. So the mounding analysis that you're saying that you did accounted for the saturated hydraulic conductivity of the underlying soils?
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess number 3, that does not seem to be in conflict with any of the standards. Do you see any conflict there? On number 3.
I don't see any conflicts. Let me see, where is the? Yeah, I don't see any conflicts with this. This is
That
a
would be
rel-
acceptable. That would be acceptable to put that in.
Sure, I'm not that familiar with the Thornthwaite analysis, so I don't know how demanding that is. But a water budget typically is very. We've done this with the Army Corps of Engineers. Typically, what they want to see is when you have a vernal pool, if you're modifying less than 25% of the area contributing to it, it's deemed to not have a measurable impact on it. So the Army Corps of Engineers and the federal folks have pretty specific guidelines and simple guidelines for how you determine that, whether or not you're likely to impact the hydrology of a vernal pool. In this case, I'd say 95% or 90% of the site around those vernal pools is staying unchanged. So I wouldn't expect under any circumstances that hydrologic regime to be changed.
Okay.
But if that were true, I suppose it would be easier to prove using this analysis. I'm not
Yeah.
that familiar with.
So I'm hearing that number 3 is something that's being done already.
I don't, they haven't submitted anything by the Thornthwaite method or equivalent method. So, not specific to the water budget,
Okay.
largely because the situation doesn't appear to warrant it.
Okay.
Well,
Typically,
Meredith-
Meredith, that's for for
Put-
example,
all right.
Meredith, if we
when
were
we
to
were-
do-
Go ahead. Sorry,
we were
finish, Sean. Okay,
Yeah.
can you let
When-
Sean
when we-
just finish?
when we were designing casino, right, we had these vernal pools all around it, and the issue became is we were modifying basically 80% of the area around the vernal pool, so we were having a very substantial impact on the water that got to it. In this case, the project, even though it's a good sized project, the vernal pool, it's really on like one side of the vernal pool, so it leaves the whole rest of the area pretty much unchanged.
Okay. Any questions from the board members for Sean?
Meredith, I don't know if you're seeing like some of the hands that are raised. Jesse Alderman's had his hand raised, and there's been times that I've had mine raised.
Sorry, I'm not
Yeah.
seeing the hands. I
think it's-
I apologize to whoever has their hand up.
Yeah,
So
and I just raised that just because I think it's partly why you're hearing people kind of talking out of order, if you will.
Okay.
So
Great.
I think if you click on the participants in your Zoom on the lower left, you'll be able to see better, maybe the hands.
no, it's being covered. I think it's, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, so that might help.
And Tim, you can keep an eye open as well if I'm
yeah.
missing.
So I did want to,
Yeah.
now that I've got the floor, I hope, Meredith.
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Sean sent us an email where he replied to each of these points. I don't know if that's something we could have Tim put up on the screen. This is very, very detailed condition that I have no expertise at all in being able to judge whether that's a good condition or not, whether it provides any protections or not, whether it's legal or not. So I feel as if I have to rely on our peer review engineers' recommendations to this. So I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure everybody else who's watching can see what our peer review engineer comments are here, in addition to what he's already provided verbally.
And thank you, Sean, for doing this. I had not seen these comments, so this is helpful.
Yeah, I'm just making sure I didn't say anything embarrassing. I didn't.
Okay.
think it was-
No, I had not seen this, so I apologize. So, yeah, this is good to review this.
So Sean, would you be able to just run through it? I know you've
Yeah.
spoken to some of it, but I think there's some things here that are a little more specific than what you just outlined.
Yeah, so these were just, I got these recommended conditions this afternoon and took a look at them real quick. So I just sort of jotted down my initial comments and these are the ones that are in orange type. The first one was, again, I just a little uncomfortable referring to anything that is based on draft because it's subject to change and can create some awkward inconsistencies that really don't do anybody any favors. But again, if the board decides that there's something that's really important to them that think is going to be, substantive, then, certainly support that. Recharge systems, there's a current requirement that all infiltration systems need to drain within 72 hours. So that's in the current regulations. The other one was, to create an additional desire to infiltrate more runoff than is currently being done seemed sort of counterproductive to the dialogue that we've had to date, which is, seemed to be centered around too much infiltration. So, I wouldn't want to be doing anything that unnecessarily increases how much they're required to infiltrate beyond what the current standards call for. A mounting analysis has been done. So the applicant did a mounting analysis. We did several to sort of approximate what the resulting mound would be from the stormwater system. And I did some initial analysis and demonstration for why, I am 100% confident that it won't break out and that it won't enter into the system above it. Then the last comment was, again, what I said before, is that the mounting analysis that was done is based on information that was collected from in situ testing, which is basically in the ground. They have to do a series of test pits in order to substantiate that the soil conditions are what they expect them to be, that the groundwater elevations are what they expect them to be. In number 2, my biggest concern was regarding the phosphorus removal. Tetra Tech actually did write the phosphorus removal documents that the EPA uses in their assessment of phosphorus removal. So we know this pretty well. Really, the only way to increase phosphorus reduction is to increase infiltration. So, that's why infiltration is usually pretty good, is that it's one of the most effective ways of getting phosphorus out of runoff. So, if there's an additional requirement to remove phosphorus, it will mean more infiltration on site. And again, that seemed counterintuitive to what the neighborhood was concerned about. And then the last was my concern about just being clear on the standards specify who's qualified, and only Massachusetts civil engineers are qualified to certify stormwater designs.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from the board on this? And then we'll go to, I just looked and I did not see hands up, so please let me know if they're back up again. No questions from members of the board?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Cheryl, you've spoken. Sean or Jim?
Just the language that Sean had marked up in red that we just saw there, where did that language come from? Who initiated that language that Sean then marked up?
That was language that I had sought.
Okay.
Yeah. As just a concern of offering something that might be just additional protective language for us. So
I understand.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Cheryl, where I have to defer to Sean on this one, Sean Reardon, and go with what our peer reviewer says. And I do appreciate your
To that
response.
point that you're requiring is probably your most effective means of ensuring that the stormwater design is constructed the way it needs to be.
John, I'm sorry, could you repeat that? You faded out for me.
To Meredith's comment about just making sure there are added protections in for the neighbors, and the bond requirement that I understand is part of this decision is by far the most sort of forceful tool, and one that is not hardly ever employed. So, that's something that is significant and will absolutely result in demonstrated compliance from the applicant.
thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So are we, is anyone seeing any hands up? Anyone who would like to speak at this time? Okay. Oh, we do
Jesse
have Jesse
Alderman.
Alderman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And apologizing for some of the crosstalk earlier.
Sorry, yeah, I didn't see your hand
No,
up.
Zoom is always, it's always like that on
That's
Zoom, we know. So thank you. I don't want to, I don't want to replow the ground that Mr. Reardon did. I think his technical expertise is very valuable here, but at risk of saying the same thing I've now said to you 3 times and written in 3 different memoranda, I really urge you to consult legal counsel on a condition like this. This is, you know, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but akin to the planning board saying, you know, what teachers can be hired or something like this. There's jurisdiction that exists. It is with the State Department of Environmental Protection, and the stormwater standards in the absence of a more stringent local bylaw have preemptive effect. And I think all 3 of these conditions, certainly 1 and 2, irreconcilably conflict with those current standards. So thank you for hearing me on that.
Yep, thank you. Okay,
My,
all right.
Meredith, one other question with respect to that is, who reviews what would get done under these new standards, and who determines whether we're compliant or not? You don't have the capacity to do that. You should.
Yeah, we should have language in that. If it's
Which has the capacity to do that.
okay.
We're this project, the stormwater components of this project have been appealed to 2 forums. One is DEP, the other is the Superior Court. We have a right to have you rely on the outcomes of those 2 appeals.
Yeah.
That's more than enough protection.
Great, thank you. And I do appreciate and value everything that Sean Reardon has done for us. So that is not to say that this is not about that. So anyone else? Tim, are you seeing any hands up? Oh, you're muted, I think, Ned. Sorry.
Sorry, I was speaking privately. I was
Okay.
perfectly muted.
That's all right. You were muted, but your mouth was moving. So I thought maybe there was something you wanted to add. Okay.
Not seeing any more hands.
No more hands. Okay. All right. So there's no hands from the public.
I mean, we do have in the attendees. I don't know if you want to start taking some
Attendees, yes.
comments
I
right
think
now.
if there's nothing else from the board, I would want to go to the attendees and allow time to speak.
We've got Fred McFadden.
Okay. Great. Welcome, Fred.
Hi, thanks. Fred McFadden, 12 Spafford Road. Just wanted to make one quick comment regarding the conversation about the hospital's commitment to doing their best to work with their staff or employees in business vehicles. I just want to reiterate that at the beginning when this all started, Rich Fernandez was very helpful and came down to our street to visit with us, and I don't think anybody doubted that he was sincere. And it didn't work. He communicated it to the ambulance companies and put out flyers, and it didn't work. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Fred. Who do we have next? Tim?
We've got Bard. I'll allow Bard to talk.
Okay. Bard,
Hi, thank
welcome. Are you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank
Yes.
you, Tim. This is Bart Hyries. I live in Spafford Road. I appreciate the last discussion here along the impacts of the water. I think you've heard, from a lot of us, we really appreciate the board's efforts to, to look at that and help protect the neighborhood. I think one important distinction, is, regarding existing conditions here, we have such a high groundwater table, and, this idea of, an order of magnitude of increased water going into the ground, is where a lot of this concern is coming from. And, to our understanding, there hasn't really been a lot of study on that. And, so I appreciate you, Madam Chair, for bringing that up. The Conservation Commission had said, oh, well, water flows downhill. You guys, Spafford and Highland are downhill from the site, but really the reality is the houses that are right along Highland are actually, downhill from the top of Spafford, and their water pumps down towards this site, just as the upland where this building would go downhill. And so the wetlands will likely change and grow and shift. And we know that these stormwater standards, are decades old. They do not factor in the changes that we're seeing in heavy precipitation events. Over 50% increase in the last few decades in the Northeast. That's the greatest in the nation. That's forecast to continue to grow. So that's part of the reason, the DEP is changing the standards. So I think, what we know now is that, the ground is going to get wetter. There's going to be more water. And if you make 2 acres of land in woodland surrounded by wetlands impermeable, and you sink part of that building up to 10 feet below the seasonal groundwater line, and are continuously draining water from around there and pumping that into the wetlands, that you're going to see impacts that with all due respect, Mr. Reardon and Tetra Tech, may technically be right on some of these points, but these are decades old standards, and the foundation pumping and draining, and that doesn't come into play. The DP is not looking at any of that. So I think we are at risk here of oversimplifying and saying, well, the groundwater mounting analysis and the Hand-Touch model is very simple. It doesn't tell us that much, but these stormwater standards are also kind of outdated. So, from a planning perspective, I think, it is appropriate to think, well, what else should we be looking at and thinking about to make sure that what we know is coming, which are wetter years, intense storms, and now, that's all been accelerated, and now we're sinking this huge building into the ground. We are building these retaining walls right up against these non-disturbed zones, and we're going to be, changing these wetlands. I think it's naive of us to think that there will be no underlying changes. And I think even Mr. Reardon acknowledged in his letter to Tetra Tech in August 2023 that there will be changes to the underlying hydrology. But then he goes on to say the neighbors and their experts have not proven that any of those will be significant. So I have not. He may have done a groundwater mounting analysis, but I have not seen it. I've seen the one from Paul Avery, which shows groundwater mounding and breakout. So does the one done by Scott Horsley. So I respectfully disagree on that point. So yeah, again, thank you so much for considering these. These are important, not just for those of us on Highland and Spafford, but all the way down to Wendell Park. That vernal pools in general are very sensitive to changes in water, as I've learned. So, when we're talking about a lot more water going to the ground, we're talking about, even if there's some, 100-foot, or I'm not exactly sure how far that the driveway is, maybe 75 to 100 feet, there will be some changes. So, something like doing a water budget, I don't believe is that onerous of something to have to do to make sure that vernal pool is protected and respected. But again, thank you for letting me speak at this and all the other hearings, and for making these points. The water issue, is real. We have these highly compacted soils. The water sits, doesn't all run off, and the houses that are right directly close to this site are going to have some issues to deal with, if this isn't designed properly. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And next, I'm seeing Jean Irwin's hand, and then Manette. We can let Jean.
Jean, you can unmute. Maybe we can go back to Jean.
Okay. Jean? Manette, you are muted. Showing Jean is.
Good afternoon. Good
Yes.
evening. Manette
Good
Donovan,
evening.
16
Welcome.
Stafford
Manette.
Road.
Yep.
Thank you all. Minette Donovan, 16 Spafford Road. I'm here before you this evening to request that you vote no. And I believe all of the facts in this record demand that you do so. What is before us is a matter which opened, frankly, a big can of worms. As a board, you did what this process is designed to do, allowed us to comment, and albeit late, we got involved, and the neighbors really became aware of what's going on here and how it will impact our neighborhood. And the applicant, rather than thoughtfully addressing these as a good neighbor would, has elected to demand a vote, essentially removing the neighbors from the equation. This takes away the opportunity, as changes are requested, for us to say, yes, we think that will work. No, we don't. And here's why. I really believe that this amounts to an abusive process. We've indicated that we want more specific water studies and showed the impact on our neighborhood. And the result is, well, you're at the DEP now, you're under appeal. Let's wait and see what they say. We should be working together on this. That's what this process is for. The traffic, same thing there. We want to do a study afterwards. We need to do that now. Last week, we were talking about mitigation of the construction, and we're saying, should we start at 7? Should we start at 8? Should we start at 9? You know how we'll know? We'll get a traffic study that shows exactly how many cars go by there. Because I was at that intersection between Spafford and Highland this morning at 8 a.m. and there were 3 cars waiting the stop sign. Unfortunately, I didn't have my phone, and I don't think you have time for one of my shows this evening. But I think it really requires more time than that. We're going to be with this forever, years of construction. And then this site is here indefinitely. It's going to outlast all of us. So the reasons for the no vote: number one, traffic. It's undisputed that we have an inordinate amount of traffic. We don't have, this is one of the oldest roads in town, about 20 feet wide, no sidewalks. The cars are going to come. The greatest predictor of future behavior is past behavior. The hospital has tried to work with us. It doesn't work. They don't have control over their vendors, no matter what the vendors sign. And I applaud you for trying to think outside the box. We're going to but I think, it's putting the fox in charge of the chicken coop. The owner of the site is going to keep a camera, and if someone takes a right, we're going to then, I guess I can't get the footage to the town, and the town will pay $250 to someone on Spafford Road. I can't quite figure out exactly how it's going to work, but I'm guessing that's probably not in the lot. I'm guessing that individual from the town probably has a lot of other things to do in their job description. And it's putting the fox in charge of the chicken coop, or the neighbors will call, such as we did for a long time with the hospital. And it just frankly does not work. The only thing that I can see would be making Spafford Road a dead end, completely blocking traffic. That's the only way I see this working out. It's too narrow for sidewalks. It's too narrow, even when traffic goes one way up the street during a certain time of day, even with speed bumps. It's a very narrow road. And so we all acknowledge we need a traffic study here. It should be done in advance, not after, because it's too late for us then. We don't have a voice then. Once this is gone, they're saying no now, and they're at their kind of at the time they would be most willing to negotiate. And we're hearing so many no's. So we're lost after your vote, frankly. As far as the water goes, the response is this is with the DEP. We don't know what they're going to come back with. They're right. So let's wait and see. It's unfortunate that we couldn't get to the table then. We asked for additional time there before the Conservation Commission, and it was not provided. A vote was taken, and now that's where we are. We should not go down this road with the planning board. Our experts are not confident that the standards are met with regard to water. If the issue isn't fully studied and the applicant's demanding to close the hearing, that leaves you with no choice but to vote no. Issue number 3, it's a scenic road and neighborhood. So we designated this a scenic road. You must look at the environmental values, the historical values, the scenic and aesthetic characteristics, and the public safety. None of those are met here. We're putting in a development that's 1.5 times the fruit center, 5 times the hospice, 16-foot retaining walls. That is not in the character of this neighborhood. I have asked on multiple occasions for what the site will look like when you drive to the top of Spafford Road. I showed a piece of paper at the meeting very late in the evening a couple weeks ago, and Sean was right. It was to the left of the Bacardi's driveway, but to the right of the Bacardi's driveway is virtually the same. It's a big wet mounded area where evergreens just aren't going to grow. So we're going to drive up, and that's where the site is closest. So maybe there's a reason I haven't been able to get that drawing of what it's going to look like from there, but that should certainly be seen before there was a vote. Next, there's a vast number of changes. We keep getting these new red line versions, and everyone discussed, and this is not our area of expertise. If the applicant wants to close the hearing, fine, but don't provide give vote before the neighbors have the opportunity to provide meaningful comment on every single page of this document. What is the rush? Why are we providing this developer with so many exceptions? We've got fire code violations. Kids are walking to school there. We've got the fire truck going multiple times a day on occasion. Delivery trucks. I have a note here from a prior meeting. You know, we have one note from the developer indicating this is how many trucks we say go there. We'd like more evidence of how many trucks have specifically requested that are going to go back and forth. There's a lot of things that are outstanding. We should not rush this. This is going to be here forever. If you vote no this evening, you will send a message loud and clear that we will not be put into a corner. We're at the DEP now because they didn't want to work with us. It's not right to do it that way, and it's what this process is for. So I implore you to vote no this evening, or when at the opportunity that there is a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Minette. Can we possibly get Jean Irwin back? I think he wanted to speak. Jean, you can join us now if you'd like.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
I
you.
apologize. I was pressing the
No.
button. I don't know why I wasn't going through. But regarding the hydrology, you know, we had a lot of these promises from the DEP, from conservation, when Marine Road was going in. And we were promised over and over there wouldn't be any adverse effects. And Tusha Wells, I don't know if you saw the pictures recently, her backyard is completely flooded. I've been friends with the Wells for many years, and I've never seen the pooling in their backyard like I've seen before. I was talking to Teresa O'Brien today. She says, Gene, she said, my pumps don't stop running anymore. My own house, I had French drains put in, and my house was dry. And now recently, in the past year or so, I'm getting water again, and I have to revisit those drains. Everyone's getting the water. And I say the DEP and conservation promised us this isn't going to happen. And it happens. So that's just one issue. Prior to the meeting, I overheard Jim say, hey, you know, there's really nothing left to talk about. And I love Jim to pieces, then I have to disagree. Jim, I'm going to have headlights coming in my room, my family room, and all my bedrooms at all hours of the day. You know, winter it gets dark early. So I'll have the morning shift lighting up my house. I'll have the 11 o'clock shift lighting up my house. I'll have the 4 or 5 o'clock shift lighting up my house. I've tried planting arborvitaes out there. I've tried planting Japanese maples. I've tried planting dogwoods. Everything dies because the town salts the roads so much up here because of all the hills. And so nothing survives. The hospital, again, we haven't seen any plans on their parking stuff yet. I'm of the opinion that Meredith Hall is probably going to win this election, and that these meetings should continue until the stuff is vetted. As we all know, walls are, character defining of neighborhoods. And people like the Wells and Karen Bacardi's and Georgia Lee, they have all these amazing mansions on Highland Street. And we're going to offset that with about the cheapest, ugliest wall known to man, this Canigliaro wall. And the Canigliaro wall, by the way, I've been looking through the different manuals on the walls, and they say it's about the least safe as far as tipping over. The previous wall, which I didn't like either, the Ready Rock, at least it wasn't a tipping hazard because it was cantilevered, and it was just a whole different design. In Milton, this is one of the only scenic roads that we're talking about, but we've crossed wetlands on Wentworth off of Ford Ranch Road. We also did Stonebridge off of Woodland. These were off the beaten path roads, but the developers were able to put in real beautiful walls. And a decent wall, to be safe, it needs to be reinforced concrete with metal. And Stonebridge Lane doesn't need any guardrails. And the guardrails, by the way, are the cheapest ones known to man. They're not recommended by anyone because they're not steel reinforced and they're subject to rotting from the road salts and everything else. They're not going to last long. And those guardrails are the only thing preventing cars and trucks from going off the road or off the, it's a cliff and down into the wetlands. And even the guardrail, as you go into this project, is on the wrong side. We have a guardrail protecting a fence instead of the guardrail protecting pedestrians on the right-hand side as you go in. The guardrail's behind the sidewalk instead of in front of the sidewalk. And so to me, this whole application is being rushed as it was rushed through conservation. As I said, they didn't even have a quorum. They were rushing so fast and, missed the mark. So I please either ask you to vote no or give the neighbors more time so we can have this thing properly vetted. And, even tonight, I'm racing because of this arbitrary deadline we have. And every single night, the neighbors that there's a meeting, if they get to speak after 11 o'clock, you have to stop because it's getting late. So the neighbors have, I agree with the last speaker, this has been a total abusive process from a neighborhood standpoint. And that's all I want to say. If you're going to vote tonight, by all means, but please vote no. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Gene. Are we seeing any other? Hands up. We have next Nadine.
No, we actually had Frank Donovan.
I'm sorry, Frank Donovan. Yes.
Hi, thank you. Frank Donovan, 16 Spafford. This is just a follow-up to last week. I had brought up a potential conflict with Jim voting. Just wondering if he's going to recuse himself if the vote does take place tonight, or how you guys handling that.
Great. Yes. Thank you, Frank, for that question. Jim, do you want to respond to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Frank's right. At the last meeting, he made an allegation that I have a conflict of interest regarding the memory clinic. Due to the fact that my father was until recently a resident at Avita of Newburyport. Mass General Law 268A, Section 23B-3 requires a public official, elected or appointed, to consider whether his relationships and affiliations could prevent him or her from acting fairly and objectively when performing his duties. A public employee, whether elected or appointed, can avoid violating this provision by making a public disclosure of the facts. an appointed employee must make the disclosure in writing to his appointing official, the town clerk. That's the law. My public disclosure is that my father is indeed a resident of Avita in Marblehead. Prior to that, he was a resident of Avita in Newburyport. I've referenced this during many meetings and feel that it's well known. It has been known for a while now. And having a father with dementia or in a memory clinic at an Avita facility or at any other facility in no way will affect my ability to stay objective, fair, impartial, and do what's right for the town of Milton and its residents. This past Thursday, I spoke with town council and determined that although there's no conflict of interest, it was suggested that it would be a good idea for me to file this disclosure form, which is called the Disclosure of Appearance of Conflict of Interest. I filed it this morning with the town clerk at 8:28 a.m. It's on file for anybody to go see. And then after that, I called the State Ethics Commission. They have an attorney of the day, kind of a hotline or an advice line. And I spoke with the attorney of the day. I explained the situation. She determined that I had done what I should have done and asked me why I needed her. And I said that I was just calling to be sure that I haven't missed anything and to be sure that there wasn't anything more I should be doing. She asked me some questions regarding my financial interest or the financial interest of my immediate family, if the special permit were approved or denied, and I said that there wasn't any. So I'm satisfied that there is nothing more to pursue here. And that's what I did to follow up on last week's allegation.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I
Thank-
hadn't been in other meetings. I didn't realize you had brought that up before, but thanks
Yeah.
for looking into that.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Okay. Is Nadine next, Tim? Do we have Nadine?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you. Nadine Hanna, 11 Stafford Road. Thank you again for all of your efforts and energies in this. Of course, we all know at this point, I agree with everything that my neighbors and Bard have all put forth before you. And I just wanted to make a simple point in that for all of the opinion given that this facility belongs here, specifically at the top of Stafford and Highland. That opinion has been given by people who are paid for by the developer, largely. The town's peer reviewer has said the problems aren't that bad or they don't exist. The neighbors have robustly brought concern, worry, significant, again, to the water, to the fire standards, et cetera, et cetera. And we have repeatedly said, we understand the town's need or want for a memory care facility in the town of Milton, but that this site is not appropriate. And for all the people who have come forward to speak as a proponent of this facility, unless they're on the payroll of the Northbridge company, no one in town has come forward and said, yes, this is the best site for this facility. The people in Milton, the town, the residents of Milton who have come forward and have had a strong opinion about this facility in this site have all been a proponent of a no vote. I have not heard a single person from the town of Milton come and say, although they might like or want to see a memory care, no one has come and said, put it here at the top of Highland and Stafford, because that's absolutely the best place for this to go without any cause or concern to the surrounding neighborhood, be it Stafford, be it down past Canton, be it anywhere surrounding this location. Everyone who lives in Milton who has spoken to this site has spoken to it being a completely inappropriate fixture placed here. We do urge you to pause or to vote no, but certainly not to allow this in with the meager mitigations that they have given and or proposed. We do not believe that there will be anything that comes of the conversation with the hospital. There will be no traffic commission coming forward with signage the moment that this is approved, saying, here you go, you know, it's a one-way, or it's a left turn only, or it's no trucks. I don't believe it will happen. It hasn't happened in the years that we've lived here. It hasn't happened in the years we've had these conversations. It hasn't happened for the emails that we stopped sending because no concrete change was ever made. The only concrete thing that could happen is to refuse this building to be implanted there at the top of our street. Thank you all again, and good luck with the rest of the process.
All right, thank you. And next we had Dan O'Neill. We can let Dan unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Dan.
Great. I just had to have my wife come down there and help me with some computer issues because I'm not that computer savvy. Thank you for Dan O'Neill, 15 Spafford Road, Milton Town Meeting Member, Precinct 9. There are so many unanswered questions that we have as neighbors. And I can't imagine that you as elected officials are still not being given the right answers to your questions, even as throughout this process, and even basically tonight. I think it's just it's unacceptable. In my 28 years as a government oversight official, I've never seen a peer reviewer that sides 100% with the applicant. Can you really call him a peer reviewer? I've never seen an applicant's attorney that gives the planning board and other town boards legal advice on the spot. He directs the chair, the Madam Chair, on how to conduct the business of the planning board on a constant basis. He threatens the town as an applicant on what what the party he's representing on is going to do. I've never seen this before. It's out of control. I'm putting it very, very mildly. And a last minute effort to mitigate the potential water damage to the neighborhood here, specifically to the odd side of this neighborhood, by the applicant's attorney and the applicant itself, even if it was urged by a planning board member, with the caveat that we as neighbors do not pursue the Conservation Commission's superseding order of conditions appeal, and not pursue any legal redress in the Superior Court. It just smacks of that they're hiding something. They want you to rush this through because they know that this is a flawed project that is too big. It's driven simply by profit and greed. There's so many unanswered questions. And if we have doubt here at Spafford, and you as an individual planning board member have any doubt that you're not getting the true facts of what they're hiding, you as a planning board member, at a minimum, should abstain from voting tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Do we have any other hands up at this time? Let me see. We have Deborah Felton. Deborah, if you can unmute yourself.
Hello. Hi, it's Deborah Felton, a town meeting member, Precinct 2. As you all know, I did come and testify at one point in support of the memory care unit at that property because I think it is the best use of that property. And nobody's threatening anything to put out something else there, but something else will go there. And we've seen this time and again in this town where people aren't thinking about what is best for the entire town and only thinking of their neighborhood. And there will be something there. And I think the memory care unit is the best. I think you have followed a very good process. I think you have opened your hearing to hear as many people as possible, and I really appreciate that. Um, there's nothing to hide here. I think everybody has been completely honest, and you've gotten all the advice that is necessary to make the decision. And just because one does not agree with somebody's decision, it is, I would be concerned about challenging somebody's veracity or expertise because somebody does not agree with the opinion. So I urge you to take a vote. There have been many hearings. I've been watching them all, and I'm sure you're all tired, just like everybody else is. I think we need to see this process through, and I urge you to vote yes tonight. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. Any other hands? I'm not seeing any. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Now I am. But I don't know if these are hands up that people have already spoken. Let's go to Teresa O'Brien, who has not had a chance to speak yet.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Teresa.
This is Teresa O'Brien at 42 Spafford Road. I just wanted to say, no one is saying don't put a memory center next door, but it would be great if it could be smaller. And looking at the planning board or the whatever we're going for, that they voted that they should put something here back in 2015. The town has changed so much since then. It would be great if they could have done something for the community. No one, like, putting a memory center there that's going to cost $4,000 a month for residents, and half those residents won't even live in town. It would have been great if they could put something there for the teens, a teen center that high school students could go play basketball or something, or put more sports fields, put maybe a school there or something else that actually everyone in town would have used, versus something that is profit for the hospital. They're going to make tons of money off this. And Northbridge is going to make tons of money of this. It's nothing for all of town. It's for a few members of the town that can actually afford this. And I would also like to just comment on traffic, the light. I've seen so many comments lately, even since our last meeting on Facebook, talking about the light at Thatcher, Canton, just how bad it is right there. And it's just going to get worse once all these trucks have to go that way and come up Highland. And the Winter Valley extra building, the school, if they put that in, the 40B, all of these developments right there is just so much for this area of town. Thank you. And I really urge everyone to vote no and to make this smaller and not to do it at all. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you. Now we have Christina de la Cruz, who's not spoken yet. And then we'll go back to those who.
Can you hear me?
Christina? Yes, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the time, Christina Dela Cruz. I own 22 and 20 Clifton Road. My concern is, in listening to this, and has been, is the traffic. Today I was walking down Spafford and there was a car parked on the street. It's a narrow street and there is not any sidewalk. So there were 3 cars trying to get by, 2 coming up the street, 3 coming down. I'm trying to walk. I have my dog. I'm walking with my sister. And this is without, a memory care of having 70, units there. There's just so much traffic and it is a cut through today. And my concern is, from what I'm hearing, is there hasn't been really any, traffic, study done. And that's surprising to me prior to a vote of, allowing this facility to be built. So my request, and I support, my neighbors, and I love Milton, and that's why I moved here. And I read about the history of Milton. Like, I am obsessed with Milton and have been However, like I'm pretty concerned these days, especially with the traffic and knowing that, you know, I'm on Clifton, it could be a cut through, knowing the water table effects and running some pumps all the time. I mean, I really think at least at the minimal, postponing the vote would be, you know, something that would be helpful while we gather more information. So I appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and we can go down. Jean, you have your hand up, and then Bard. I don't know if it's a new hand or if it's up from previous.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Jean.
Hi. In regards to, you know, when people say, well, something's going to go there. One, I'm not so sure anything's ever going to go there because we've never discussed the sewer. And I believe the connection on Spafford is illegal. And I believe the 2-inch ejector line that myself and my neighbors can't tie into is illegal. But also, the town did pass a CPA. This neighborhood doesn't have any parks. The CPA, you know, they claim they want to preserve a historic site. This is certainly a historic site. It's the old Russell Horse Farm. And secondly, you know, to protect the wildlife. Yes, they'd be protecting the wildlife if the CPA bought it. And thirdly, open space. And yes, if something was to go there, I'd like to see the town buy it with the CPA money and do something that this neighborhood could enjoy. Because I say this neighborhood, we don't have Cunningham Park, we don't have Andrews Field, we don't have Kelly Field. We have nothing here for the youth. And there's been a turnover of this neighborhood where all the original people who bought the houses back in the 50s and 60s, they're all turning over. It's now all young families. And that's an option for the hospital. I also think the new memory care clinic could go, if we had to have a compromise, right on the hospital property itself. When you pull in on the Highland Street entrance, there's plenty of room on the left next to the police station. And instead of building thousands and thousands of feet of retaining wall, they could put another level on the parking garage. And I originally suggested when this whole thing started that the hospital could land bank a lot of this wetland across the street, if not all of it, and develop the wet acre between the hospital and the library. And they could have shared parking, which they both desperately need. So there's plenty we can talk about. I think this decision is being rushed. And again, I urge a no vote, that we postpone it and just keep the conversation going until we come up with a mutually beneficial situation for everyone, a win-win-win situation. Thank you again for your time.
Great, thank you, Jean. And Bard, you can speak next.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thanks, everyone, again. I wanted to answer, I think a question was asked at the beginning. There was a question, I think, Cheryl has suggested that some of the traffic mitigation funds be put towards a more comprehensive traffic study. And then I think, Meredith, you had said, well, maybe we should ask the neighbors for input if that's a preferred first step, or if speed humps on Spafford would be a preferred first step. And to answer that, I think I would say, for us living on Spafford, the speed humps, and I provided some data last time that, they cost about $2,000 each per the Mass, MassGov website. I think that would be really, that kind of a physical barrier would be a practical way to ensure public safety. And I think above all else, I try to be practical, and, our town is changing, and we are obviously going to get more traffic from any number of projects. And the cost, the expense, and I guess the logistics from talking with, DPW in the past of putting in sidewalks on Spafford, it's a more challenging thing, where speed humps is relatively short money by comparison, and but it provides real public safety protection. So I would say, as a neighbor, a resident here living a few hundred feet from where this facility might go, the speed humps would be kind of selfishly for us, I think, would be real protection. But I do think the town, it's one of the points a prior caller made about think beyond yourself and your neighborhood. This corridor here is used by so much of the town. And if you look at the map, there's so much of our town that is disconnected, from east to west. So I really do think it behooves the town to do a more comprehensive traffic study with all these projects coming online to figure out, maybe some of these streets should be one ways in one direction. Maybe we should have a different traffic pattern. Maybe we have to take off some of the do not enters, like Highland Street is a permanent do not enter. I don't want to send more traffic to my neighbors on Upper Highland, but some of these things have been put in place, have created the current conditions. So if we really want to think bigger for the whole town, so that people aren't taking half an hour to get from East Milton to the high school, or to go to Flatley Field for the kids' soccer, and it takes you, you're better off playing in a neighboring town than you are trying to get from one side of Milton to the next. It's probably in the best interest of the town as well as the neighborhood to have that traffic study. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully it helps, sort of like immediate relief, and then maybe longer term planning for the whole town, and not just us, I think would really be a benefit. And just final thing, most of us, in fact, all of us have not been opposed to the memory care use case. I think what we've been opposed to is the overutilization of that site. For those of you watching at home, what this developer and this applicant is asking for is to violate state law. Every single day, we will be having trucks crossing over the opposite travel lane on Highland to get in and out of this facility as it is currently planned. And that's a public safety risk. That means traffic either has to stop and wait, or you're going to have an accident. That means pedestrians have to be very mindful, and that means it makes it more difficult for all of us to share these streets. So there's a reason that those state regulations exist. There's a reason the town bylaws exist. Those things are not being met currently, and certainly we're not being unreasonable by asking that those things be met. And for those reasons, including others, for example, in the zoning that they do not follow, particularly the site design standards, where the zoning says that the plan should work with the existing terrain. I think everyone at home should understand this plan radically changes the existing terrain of the site. It reverses the hill. It builds up, perching their building on top of a man-made hill and erecting 13, 14, 16, 19-foot retaining walls, hundreds of feet of them, all along the border of the wetlands, and in the non-disturbance zone, in some cases violating them, which is a violation of the town bylaw, which is never granted in 80 cases that we looked at. So there's some exceptions here that are being made to the detriment of all of us. So it's not just our neighborhood. There are good reasons why these state regulations for public safety are there, and we'll all be living with the consequences. And so for those reasons, I would also echo my neighbors and ask you to vote no, or if you feel like there's not enough information, abstain. And you could send this back. We don't believe that the developer and the applicant and Milton, BID Milton would be willing to just walk away from this. We know that they have places that are 60 units, not 70 units. If they did it 60 units, they could move their loading dock to the back to reduce noise pollution. They could withdraw from the non-disturbance zone so they're not violating town bylaws. They could put more screen in to hide those retaining walls, because now you're in drier land and the evergreens might live. So there are a lot of benefits to scaling back the project, a minimal amount that we've asked for, and it's non-negotiable. There's a certain profit they want to make. So we're here saying, well, it should be non-negotiable to allow them to break state and local bylaws and regulations. So, for all those reasons, we urge you to either abstain or vote no. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope everyone also understands how amazing of a board we have and how lucky we are to have all of you. So thank you again.
Thank you, Bard. Appreciate that. And we have Teresa O'Brien. I don't know if your hand is up from your previous, or if you'd like to unmute yourself, and if there was something else you wanted to add. Okay, Teresa's hand is down. So anyone else on the attendees who wishes to speak at this time? Okay. All right. Any one from the board who has any information that they would like to seek during this public hearing? I'm not seeing anyone. Okay. All right, at this time, would members, do we feel ready to close the public hearing?
I do.
So I just have a process question. If we close the public hearing, do we actually have to take a vote tonight? Or don't we have so many days to take a vote?
We have been asked to take a vote this evening.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for the 111 Highland Street Memory Care Facility.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor? Roll call, Cheryl,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, now at this time, the public hearing for 111 Highland Street special permit is closed, and the board can begin our deliberations. If anyone would like to go first?
How much time do we have?
As
Thank
much time to deliberate as we need. Yeah. But if there's discussions from the board on the information that's been provided, I'd open it up for conversation.
So I'll just open up part of the discussion.
Okay.
You know, our responsibility is to render a decision about whether the application meets the zoning, whether it provides for a public good, and whether impacts have been mitigated. So I think if we look at the first, whether it meets the zoning, we've been provided that information in terms of the dimensional criteria, the dimensional standards, I should say. And I don't think there's any question that the dimensional standards have been met. There's the site plan, site design standards and the building design standards that I think we've had some discussion about, and we could discuss whether we think that those have been adequately met. And then we spent a lot of time really talking about the fact that there is no memory care facility in Milton currently, that town meeting approved such use on this, at this location, and having considered that it would be a use that would have lesser impacts than other kinds of uses that could be here. So when this was rezoned, it was rezoned with this use as an allowed use here. And then, you know, the mitigation of the impacts. I think we've spent a lot of time talking about conditions and how many conditions and whether those conditions could mitigate the impacts. I think we all recognize that there's the situation in this location due to the hospital being here, that and also due to the groundwater situation that exists here, that exists today and will exist tomorrow, no matter whether this project is approved or not. To the extent that this project changes things, it's required to be mitigated. So I think that's where our conversation really should focus. Have we covered has the project in its, and what it has been proposed and in the conditions that we've put in the decision adequately covers mitigating the impacts?
Okay, great, thank you.
And to Cheryl, to your point about town meeting approving it, I understand that town meeting approved the bylaw, but it was specifically said town meeting was approving zoning and not approving a project.
Yeah, Maggie, that's why I said the use.
The use.
Because there's been some talk about the use, you know, here, whether this is a good use for this site. And I just wanted to be clear that the use is allowed. There's
Yep.
other things that are more subjective, but the use is definitely allowed here.
And I don't think anybody has questioned the use.
I
Not,
thought I heard some.
I think there are alternatives, that are out there. But very few people have questioned the use. And the other thing, are the conditions adequate? I personally don't think that they're adequate. That's why I asked how much time do we have? And where do we want to start? Because I believe, like, for myself, that I would be a yes. Like, I would have been a yes a long time ago if I felt like the applicants were listening to the neighbors. And it's frustrating to me, not wanting to support a use that town meeting approved. Because I understand the use, like, I understand it very, very, very well. And I'm disappointed that the applicant, hasn't come to the table and hasn't, all along, non-negotiable, 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 and that is so frustrating to me. So that's just one of my thoughts.
Sean or Jim?
You want to go first, John, or want me to go?
Sure. I think I'll speak more than once. Just because I think as this conversation goes along, we'll all have varying thoughts and additional thoughts. But with respect to the non-negotiable comments that Maggie made, I think what I'm going to learn from this process is that when we pass an article in town meeting that allows zoning, and we passed an article that allowed specific number of units and beds, rooms and beds, and this applicant's been reluctant to give any ground on that. And I'll probably be I'll be much more focused in town meeting with the specifics of language, because I like Maggie feel that we haven't really been able to gain any relief from the applicant with regards to the size of the building. And they have ardently pursued the number of beds and the number of rooms that is written into the article that was passed in town meeting. Now, a few meetings ago, when this conversation of size of building came up, while I have that frustration that I just mentioned, Sean Reardon, when we were discussing size of building, Sean articulated for us how size of building was not significant in terms of changing the balance between pervious and impervious. And what he outlined was that the impervious area, other than the building, the impervious area of the drive, of the circular area in front of the building, of the drive to the rear parking lot and the parking lot, that really, it was a reduction in size of building would not provide any significant relief. So while I'm frustrated that there wasn't some concession in terms of number of beds, number of rooms, I also have to accept what our consultant had said to us, that it wouldn't have been a significant mitigation with regard to pervious and impervious area.
Jim, do you mind if I just jump in on
No,
something
go
there
ahead.
that Sean said? We talk about the zoning and the number of beds. were some other standards in the zoning. For example, the coverage. So the building exclusive of, I'm just looking at right now at the zoning, the building exclusive of exterior courtyard areas and any accessory building shall cover no more than 16% of the existing buildable area of the lot. And that buildable area is defined as not including wetlands and buffer zones and vernal pools, etc. And that the floor area ratio not be greater than 23% of the building area. And so the application is actually less than that on the coverage at just under 14%, with the maximum at 16 again, and the floor area at 21%, with the maximum at 23%. And then on the open space, a minimum of 33% of the buildable area shall be open space. And this application has 74% of the buildable area as open space. So these are areas in which it's not maximized to the fullest extent that the zoning allows. I just want to point that out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
Jim?
yeah, I really thought that what was passed at town meeting drove this use at this site. And honestly, if I was Northbridge, I would be doing the same thing. I would max it out and get as many beds as possible on the site, because at the end of the day, it's a financial decision. And I was hoping that we could reel it in a little bit with design guideline or with convince, hoping the hospital would see things our way, or hoping Northbridge would see things our way. And I do agree that if you scale it back to 50 beds, you're still tearing up the land, you're still building that massive causeway, we're still dealing with the 19-foot stone wall in places. And I've written down a whole, just every topic that I think was important, from traffic all the way down. And unfortunately, I haven't seen, one large thing or a lot of little things that would compel me to vote no, especially because we're going against town meeting. And because the alternative is a 40B. I mean, I really believe that the hospital will do a 40B if this starts to take too long and cost them too much money and they just can't make a memory clinic work here. The alternative is just to sell to a third party and then put in a 40B. I mean, all the heavy lifting to engineer access to the site has already been done. So a 40B developer will just take that and maximize the number of units that will go there. And I think that impact is way worse than a memory clinic on the neighborhood and on the town as a whole. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Maggie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, which topic? Again, there's a lot of miscellaneous. I do believe that our town, what makes our town so special is all the individual neighborhoods. And I think every neighborhood brings something different to the town. And what affects one neighborhood, it truly affects all of us. And every neighborhood is important. And I know that the neighbors don't want to be viewed as their obstructionists, just like I don't. They're protecting their neighborhoods. And even though town meeting passed, what is allowed, they're all maximums. Just because they were maximums, it doesn't mean that we actually have to allow it. So that's my frustration. If you go down the whole list, maximum, maximum, maximum. And yes, I understand Sean Reardon said, that, the impervious surfaces wouldn't be, affected or diminished, but everything else would be. The number of, deliveries would be reduced because the number of beds would be reduced, so the number of patients would be reduced, or residents would be reduced. The number of linen deliveries and the trash coming, all the other uses would be diminished. So I do think that it is in our purview to, deny this permit on the size of the building because it is written that that's maximum. You know, I have issues like with timeline. This whole process, I agree, that it, even though it's been a year, we have not been getting information in a timely manner. I mean, we were getting information, today. You know, it's hard to digest everything in a few hours. And I feel like we're being pressured to digest it quickly. And that's not how a good process works. Like if we're talking about process, and I think we all like a good process, like in our professions, we like a good process. And you know, and this has not been a good process. It's been a lot of information last minute, and we go late into the night, and everybody works so hard. Everybody does. I'm not critical of anybody, all sides, all opinions, but I am a little critical of the timeline. And I don't like to be pressured. I don't like to be pressured. I like to digest things. I like to talk to various people, in digest it and get people's opinion from all neighborhoods and all towns. So I haven't been happy with this, the process. The biggest thing for me is all the environmental impacts. You know, there's so many impacts to the wetlands, to the vernal pools. You know, again, I mentioned it before, I'm your representative to the Climate Action Committee. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, the whole ecosystem of our town, you know, and even the UN has declared that this is the decade of restoration. And the best way to restore all of the loss and to help with climate change is not to destroy. And we're destroying this piece of property, destroying. And it's not just this piece of property, you know, it's the 40B piece of property next to you, Cheryl. We're destroying that. There's been no environmental impact analysis that's been done. You know, there's just too much commercial pressure on our town, and not just our town, but all towns. And there's too much asphalt, too little green space, and you know, things have changed in 10 years, you know, since the master plan was written, and we need to review it. We need to review it. You know, just recently at a selectmen's meeting, they had, you know, the Neponset River waterway in, and they warned Milton that climate change will lead to an increase in floodplains, that stormwater would increase by 200% right in Pine Tree Brook and its wetlands. You know, it's that you look back to what's happened in Leominster last year, you know, and our own governor said, this is the world we now live in. Every day we see weather that we haven't seen before. Things are happening that people haven't dealt with before. And here we are purposely destroying a very important piece of property. You know, just so much has changed, and I just think we have not looked at the environmental impacts to this. Removing 300 trees is huge. It's huge. And it's not just be impactful to this neighborhood, it'll be impactful for our whole town. So if we're gonna look at the impacts of the town, here we are trying to adopt, this advanced stretch code to help decrease our, greenhouse gases. And then, the next page, we're like taking down 300 trees. It makes no sense to me.
One thing I would say, I'm sorry, if I may, on that one, Maggie, on the tree removal, like the 2 lots on Central Ave, people have property rights.
No, I
And we-
understand.
And
that-
there are property rights related to this particular piece of property as well. So we have to be mindful of that aspect of our decision making and what the law, allows for with those property rights. And to your point about larger issues in the town and tree removal and stormwater, it is a larger issue that's beyond this particular project that I'm anxious to hear what the Climate Action Planning Committee, this report's going to look like. I do think we have to make sure that we bear in mind what our responsibility is as well, that this is an application under a particular section of our zoning, and we have to make our decision based on that zoning. And if, to the extent that something is in the zoning that overlaps with those concerns that you have, then we can consider that. But I think we can't make this project in this particular site the story of saving the town from other strategies that are happening elsewhere when that's not something that the zoning can do.
Right, and one of the things of this particular zoning is for a public good. And that's a huge part of this zoning. And that it will not cause any detriment to the neighborhood and will serve the public good and will provide a public benefit. And removing all those trees, interfering and interrupting our wetlands and vernal pools do not provide a public benefit nor a public good.
If it goes 40B, how can you control the number of trees that come down?
So I can't be directed by fear. I think every project has to be a standalone project on its own merits. And I think we're being pressured out of fear. And I think that's a shame, and I don't think BI should be doing that. I've always called it Milton Hospital, but someone reminded me recently, it's not our nice little Milton Hospital that we all grew up with and loved. It's not, it's changed. When my mother was there in December, she spent 2 nights in the hallway, and that never would have happened at the old Milton Hospital I loved. It's BI, and they're selling to a for-profit business. And we have to view this as the merits of this application. And I think, as Sean pointed out earlier, that if BI wants to remain or they're concerned with being part of our Milton community, then they shouldn't be threatening that.
Yeah, I don't take it as fear, Maggie. I take it as a smart business decision. If they don't get this, they're going to do that. It's a plan B. I'd be doing the same thing if I were them. I would much rather see a memory clinic than I don't know how many units of 40B you can put in there, because we lose all control with 40B. And the impact is going to be a hell of a lot worse for that neighborhood and the town at large. I mean, I can't state that enough. And I do think they're going to do it because they're not Milton Hospital anymore, because they're a conglomerate. They want to maximize their return on their land. It's just simple business. I think you're on mute, Meredith.
Thank you, John. I just was going to say, I just agree with everything that the board has stated. But we do need to make a decision based on the zoning. We do know that this process is not over, depending on if we do decide to grant an approval. This will still go through the DEP process. There will be standards that will definitely have to be met. Regards to, the engineering department, the DPW is going to have to review all connections, that everything is done properly. So our fire department, we've heard from them, and I do believe that we need to rely on the experts. We are not experts, and as much as I question and challenge, as you know I have, I do believe that we need to rely on our peer review experts, our fire chief, the engineering department. I think these are the folks, and DEP, that will ultimately review this. So I think we have to consider the zoning within that context. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, my last thing is, like, there's just no neighborhood support for this. And in my experience of following the planning board process, I find it unfathomable that a project would be passed and given a special permit that has zero neighborhood support. Like, even in the end, 440 Granite Ave ended up having neighborhood support. And this has zero neighborhood support. And to me, that is just mind-boggling a little bit.
And I do want to add, I just want to thank the neighbors, because they've been exceptional. The amount of the questions, the thoughtfulness, the concern, I understand as neighbors. But I am also concerned. We have been put in a really difficult position, which is unfortunate. And I agree, Maggie, it's no longer Milton Hospital. This is now the BID system. And they do have a fiduciary responsibility. And if this project is not approved, we have been told without question, there will be a plan B, and it will have a greater significant impact to the neighborhood, which is, I just would not want to see that for any of these neighbors. They are just really wonderful, wonderful residents, and I just would not want to see a 40B project that would be 3 stories, 5 stories. We don't know. It's an unknown, but there will be something that will definitely have a greater significant impact, a detrimental impact, much greater than this site, I believe, this use.
And I think that would be a shame, because
agree.
BID has a board comprised of Milton residents. And if they don't step up to defend and protect our neighborhoods, that's shameful. That is just very shameful. And I would expect all of the board members to really step up, because they are our neighbors and we see them every day.
Well, let's, I think, be mindful about the kind of terminology we use for our neighbors too. BID is our neighbor as well. Some of our residential neighbors have sold their properties, and 40Bs are being developed on those properties that our neighbors sold. Other people have sold their property, and every tree and every rock is being removed. So we don't call out every single person who's changing their property by name and call them villains. And so I think we need to be mindful of our language here and come back to the actual decision and the zoning. So I would say we've spent, with the applicant and with their team and with our peer review consultants, quite a lot of time in thinking about what are the impacts and how they can be mitigated. Stormwater's been one of the significant questions, and we've pressed, I think, our peer review consultant, Sean Reardon, quite a bit on in some ways, maybe unfairly, on his own expertise, on the expertise within his company. And he's come back to us and provided us with his reasons for his opinions and his qualifications and those of civil engineers and hydrologists within his firm at Tetra Tech. I certainly believe I need to, and the board should rely upon our peer review expert for stormwater. We are not civil engineers and stormwater hydrologists, et cetera. We also have an opinion from our engineering department. We've had opinions from our fire chief, who's worked with our peer review consultant as well as our traffic consultant and peer review on the traffic. This is our standard practice in the 9 years I've been on the board, is to rely on these experts to help us on these very technical components of these applications. And they've provided us with good guidance about what we should do and think about in these conditions that we've put in the decision. So I think that if we think about the things that are discretionary in terms of the design standards in the site and in the building, we've pushed on those. And as well, I agree that I would have liked to have seen some things changed in the design. I pushed and pushed for certain things so there would be less cut and fill. But then there's a certain point where this building type, the function of this building dictates how it can be designed. It's not the same as some other building types, which have more flexibility in how they function. And I've been educated about that through this process. So I think they have done, and to the best that this building can do in terms of meeting those standards.
And I would just add that Northbridge does have an excellent reputation for what they do. They definitely are a premier memory care assisted living facility and have a very good reputation in the community. And I would like to say that we have added some real significant conditions, including the bonding that are protections, again, for this neighborhood, which I'm grateful that those were accepted conditions.
You know, with regard to some of the comments that was stated earlier, and I do agree with Cheryl, every property owner in town has rights. Doesn't matter who it is, whether you own 5,000 square feet or you own 100,000 square feet. So we do have to acknowledge that this property is owned and they do have rights. I do feel everyone has had a chance to exercise their rights. We have listened to the neighbors. I think, well, we've never really stopped listening to the neighbors, and we've listened to them through tonight. And yes, they will say that the meeting closed because the applicant requested closure and we accepted that. So they may not agree with me, that they may say we didn't listen to them enough. I think we've worked to try to improve some of the conditions that could arise as a result from development. I also feel like there are some pre-existing conditions that have made any proposed development of that land parcel, subject to the types of concerns that the neighbors have had. Obviously Spafford Road has had problems with traffic for a very long time, and this facility hasn't even been built. The project, any project, it requires multiple factors for it to occur. First, the owner has to prefer that he wants to develop, but there has to be zoning compliance. There has to be building code compliance. There has to be stormwater management compliance. There has to be fire code compliance, and they'd have to be compliant with all the conditions that we've outlined. So it's not a matter of development without restriction. This development, if it were to pass, and it has future thresholds that it will have to accomplish. It is going to have to accomplish DEP approval. That is the highest authority in the state for stormwater management. And it's not foregone that that will be achieved. They'll have to achieve it. I do want to say something on stormwater because I want to make the record clear. In the last meeting, I was, and prior to the last meeting, I was asking the applicant to create some funding, for the residents to have available to them to address their own individual stormwater issues. And I did have conversations with the applicant. In the course of those conversations, I never anticipated that the applicant would expect that the neighbors would withdraw their request of the DEP review. That was not a conversation I had with Ned. It didn't occur to me that that is what the applicant would expect. And it didn't occur to me that that would actually be something that we would, representing the neighbors, would have to give in. So at that time, my goal was to try to create a fund that the applicant would make available for the residents, and I never expected that we would forego DEP approval. And I wanted to make the record clear. If anyone thought that I was, considering an exchange of $100,000 for DEP approval, no way. I would never have been on board with that. So we find ourselves, I think, in a very difficult situation. I think no matter what decision is made here tonight, there'll be people that will be dissatisfied with the process, dissatisfied with the decision, and probably maybe eventually okay, but for the near term, probably very dissatisfied with the outcome of this. I think it's unfortunate because I do think that we've worked to try to improve the proposed development and to make it a better project.
Any other comments? Okay. Not seeing any.
So Meredith, I'll make a motion to approve the special permit and the site plan approval for the special care, memory care residence development at 107, 111, 0 Highland Street. And that the decision be in the form as reviewed and finalized at our meeting tonight.
Is there a second on that?
I'm sorry, second.
Okay. Any further discussion? No further discussion? Okay. Then I think, are we ready to take a vote? I think we need to, now that we have a motion and a second. All right, if we would like to start, Cheryl,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Maggie,
No.
Sean,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Okay, that concludes our the evening of discussion of 111 Highland Street special permit. Okay. Thank you all, and thank you again for all the neighbors and all of your input. This was a difficult
Meredith,
decision. Yep.
One last thing. I didn't include in the motion, but we could have a separate motion to authorize the Director of Planning and Community Development to sign the decision on our behalf.
Is there a second on that?
Well, I have a question about that. So when I ran, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't want my signature on something I did not approve. So I just want to make sure that it's not implied that I'm in support of this project. So I think I would prefer that we all individually sign it.
Okay.
Fine.
Tim, do you want to comment on that?
I think
That's acceptable.
I think you're good either way. We've had. I actually don't know what the actual formality is here. I just know that I've seen approvals from the planning board that have 3, 4, 5 signatures on them. So if each
All right.
individual member wants to sign or not sign, if you want to authorize me, I think you're in the clear either way.
All right, out of respect for Maggie's request, why don't we just leave it that we will each individually sign? And Tim, once you have that decision,
Yeah, we'll have that printed out and out at the office for you. And if over the next day or so, I know tomorrow's a big day. Maybe on your way back from your polling place, you can stop by town hall and sign. That would be great.
all right, great. All right, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you all
Next,
for,
yes,
thank
sorry.
you all for an incredible process. We appreciate all of your time and effort. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So moving on, we are now on item number 5, which is our old business, the MBTA communities zoning discussion. The review and the vote on the technical assistance RFP responses. Tim, do you want to introduce this?
Yes. So it's maybe a little bit more than a month ago. The board approved a scope of work for consultant services to assist us in similar to our original go around with MBTA communities to operate the to run scenarios of the compliance model and to assist us in the sort of the conception and analysis of new zoning districts. We sent that along to 4 different firms, to MAPC, to UTIL, which had been working with us previously, to Innis and Associates, and to the Barrett Planning Group. We did only get one affirmative response from UTIL, which I sent around last week. Should be in your materials folders. Everybody else, whether through a sort of a lack of bandwidth, it was mostly everyone is busy with this work and frankly, wasn't able to take on additional work with Town of Milton. So we do have the one response from UTIL. I think, they for whatever came out of the wash in our first process, I think with the board's direction, I think they can continue to do a good job. I think that their work product was good, and again, I think having gone through this already once before, I think we know a little bit more about the model, we know a little bit more about the law, we know a little bit more about the guidelines. I think the board's ability to really kind of get what they want out of this is and that's not a knock or anything. I think we're all kind of walking around in the tall grass. Last time I think we're much better prepared to have a really efficient process with UTIL. So that's where we are.
Tim, one question. Would the team that UTIL would provide to us be Matthew and Zoe, or would they propose a different team?
I'm bringing up the proposal right now.
They did
just to double
they
check
did
on that.
propose it, Sean. I did look at that. They did. They have a few other folks that are assisting. One of the things that while you're pulling that up, Tim, if I may, Meredith, is
Yes.
I noticed that they weren't specific about 2 different compliance paths, or at least 2, I guess. So that was something I called Tim about, and I'm hoping, Tim, that you had a chance to speak with UTIL about that. And then the other thing I really think we should really think about and focus on is the schedule. And maybe we could do that. I mean, if we all agreed that we would authorize engagement with them, I'd like to spend like the first meeting with them really kind of talking about how the schedule would work. Just because I kind of feel as if last time around, we were just kind of going from meeting to meeting and reacting instead of really sort of setting some milestones in the process. So if the board needs to make decisions by a certain date to meet a schedule, do we think that's enough adequate time to make those decisions? Sort of really talk through the schedule and the deliverables. I know there's a portion of their proposal that has that, Tim, if you're able to screen share it. There's it has the schedule and it has the milestones. It's not the necessarily the detailed description of, well, there's the detailed description. But the which we of course should look at, but the that, yeah, I guess we need to maybe jump back and forth, but I was concerned about basically how quickly item 1 has to get done in, you know, sort of the, I guess there's going to be district boundary discussion in terms of responses and revisions, but 3 weeks seems like a pretty short amount of time. But anyway, I don't know that we have to resolve it tonight, but I really do think a conversation with them, you know, at a meeting to kind of really talk through their thoughts about this would be helpful to me.
Tim, is this, I'm looking at the timeline, the same one you have there, I have it on my screen as well. Was this the timeline that they created? Did we have a guideline for a timeline?
I think I'd have to go back and check what the exact verbiage in the proposal was, but I think we had been, you know, based on feedback from the town administrator's office, you know, assuming a late September, early October town meeting, and you can kind of see that kind of bear out, you know, over here. I know since then, you know, the board has kind of discussed, you know, do we need to have 2 specials, you know, one in October, one in December if we need time. You know, we haven't broached that with the select board or the town administrator yet, but I think, you know, that's definitely something, you know, it's, UTL thinks they can get it done. I tend to kind of, you know, agree with Charles' concern just a bit, you know, just knowing that, again, I said earlier, I think we can be more efficient than last time, but also, it is a very tight timeline. I haven't been able to get clarity on the sort of the multiple options. I'll follow up with UTL about that. I know it's not specifically called out, but also, you know, you may be able to kind of generally read that assumption into some of the tasks that they propose, but we should, you know, obviously get some clarity on that from them, which I will follow up on.
Yeah, I agree with your concern and Cheryl's too. That schedule has us about 8 weeks to a public meeting presentation.
So if you go to the detailed part now, Tim, I know I was kind of going back and forth. They're not really, so there, that item 1, which was about a month for the first 3 tasks, and then the visualizations, I think, followed it a little bit. And then, but if you go down to item 2, which is the revisions, so public meeting presentation, if you go now back to the schedule, when is that public meeting presentation? Under
June.
2.2 there.
Yeah, it's like the last week in June.
Yeah. And there's some time preparing for that, right? So that's, it really is almost, and it won't be the first week of May, obviously, that we're starting with them. If we authorize them and they come to if they're able to come on the 9th, we're really removing that first week as well.
Yeah, so that's my concern is we know that the SJC is not meeting and making a decision until October. So my question is, why are we kind of rushing this process? I feel like the town should have a December town meeting I think this is an unrealistic schedule. And and I don't know if we have to go back to the selectmen or not to check in, but I would think that we should let them and let them know what our concerns are, and that hopefully they will schedule an October meeting. And and because I don't want to do a lot of, not that I'm afraid of doing work, but we have a, a very busy schedule. And why rush things if we don't have to? And then we're always going to be late. We're always going to be late.
Well, one thing I would say is, I think we need to set some parameters in the beginning. I do think we need to get the public input. So I do think the scorecard and the survey questions that have been floating around for a bit now, if we could discuss in our meeting on May 9th, we need to help guide our consultants. So, and we need to help, they responded to a schedule that we provide or sort of mapped out. But I think it's our opportunity to talk with them about, what we would like to see, and have them respond to us what they think is a reasonable amount of time to do it, rather than the actual end date. So I'm kind of thinking about working from the task, and our expectations being aligned, and then they telling us how much time they need for it. So we need to tell them how many public meetings we think we need. We need to talk about how we're going to solicit public feedback, and how we're going to consider that feedback, and how they're going to consider that feedback. Should we have a public forum right out of the blocks, because a lot of people, I don't actually think truly understand the requirements. There was actually an excellent article in the Boston Globe today outlining sort of some of the just factual aspects of the zoning. But in any case, I would like to recommend that we go forward with UTL. Sorry, Meredith, you were going to speak before I said.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
Let's decide if this is
yeah. So I would say
if we want to work with UTL,
yeah.
and then we can discuss. I think we should let them present and offer the kickoff meeting, the May 9th meeting. Meanwhile, Tim will be able to get more information. I agree with Maggie that that creating an unrealistic date of a town meeting when we know that the SJC is not even going to meet until the mid-October. So we won't even know, we don't want to schedule a town meeting based on this. That's,
So
in advance of the results of the decision of the court. So setting our kickoff meeting, and then I think we discuss with UTL going over our schedule.
So I also like to, I know I've done some further analysis of the parcels within some of the districts, and I'm thinking I would like to be able to review that both with all of you and with UTL. So if we can think about that meeting, that would be a kickoff with them. Do we also intend that to be a discussion of a scorecard or a way to measure the districts about the
I think
public
we had said
input
we
of a
want to
survey?
start. I think we want to start with the survey and the scorecard.
Right. Okay. So I'm just trying to understand whether UTL is going to be part of that or not. Do we think?
So just to kind of chime in, we'll need to. So the 9th is a possibility.
Mhm.
The town administrator is going to need to sign a contract. The contract with UTL is with the town. That's how all of our contracts work. So we'll need to sort of, the planning board will recommend to the select board that we engage, and the select board meets before town meeting. We could see about getting on that agenda. There's just a little bit more back and forth. UTL has already signed a contract with the town. It shouldn't take a lot of time to review a fresh one on their end. But there are some steps in here that are just kind of timeline steps that need to be taken. So I think focusing on work that the board can do itself for the 9th. And if we can get UTL in, then great. But I think you know, it's there'll be a definite for the second meeting in May, and a possibility for the first meeting in May.
Right. So the analysis that I've done, just so you know, is just taking a look at how many lots fall into certain size categories, because we set our minimum lot size 7,500 in some areas, and there's a certain number of parcels that are not, therefore don't contribute to that, which affects our unit capacity in those areas. I have analyzed what the unit capacity and the net new was in those prior districts, and the net new was not 70, as we talked about. And I really just want people to understand that before we jump back into looking at these districts along the trolley, which we know there's going to be an area of focus, so that we truly understand this area, which has over 300 parcels. Okay, so that.
Yep. That seems reasonable that we could.
And when would we give, like a suggestion as to like a different parcels that we haven't even looked at yet?
I think that could be with util, but if we wanted to do it together first and then give it to util the following meeting, that seems like it's a possibility as well.
Okay. And when do we give, if we want to add a couple questions to the survey, are we discussing that now, or is that at our next meeting?
I think that's at our next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is this coming out of our budget or is this the grant money that's paying
There
for
is
this?
a portion of it is grant funding, and then a portion of it will be planning board budget. I think we've got $20,000, give or take a couple bucks, left in grant funding, and then the remainder would be planning board budget, which planning board has its entire budget left for this fiscal year. So there's plenty of money for this contract.
But then we'll also have to fund a 10% article, right? Out of our own pocket, out of our budget with no grant money.
That's correct.
So do you think we'll have money for both?
Yes, I think there will, and again, you know, let me bring this back up just to see what the final figure is, because we had set a $50,000 not to exceed on this. So the final price proposal from Util is 49,914. It's funny how that always
Well, they
gets.
have it at 40, and then there's some additional pieces.
Yeah. So that and so that'll be part of my kind of follow up with them. But all that said, you know, there is, like I said, $20,000 in grant funding, and then the planning board has its whole $50,000 budget. So if there is, you know, additional scope that we need to add to this, you know, additional kind of, you know, creative invoicing to make sure that we're keeping, you know, stuff segregated, you know, we should have the flexibility to do that.
So we should also make sure we're going to have funds for an economic, well, I guess that could come in the next fiscal year, actually, because the new fiscal year starts in July, right? So that, and then also design guidelines. I know that's something we've talked about and have thought would be valuable. And if we did have, you know, that extra time, like if we did have until December, I think
That would be great.
we don't necessarily want to use it and not get to design guidelines. I think, you know, it would be useful to know how much time that might be too. That might be a 2 or 3 month effort as well. And how much fee, I've forgotten what the fee was for the Milton Village one. Do you recall, Tim?
No, I don't.
It seems like it was around 20,000.
Around 20, okay.
Is
So
what I
design guidelines are above and beyond the 50?
Mm-hmm.
So we just blew our budget, so we have no money for the 10%.
No, but
10
Jim,
grand, 10%.
our budget this fiscal year ends the end of June, so we start a new fiscal year July 1. So as long as town meeting passes the boards and committees budget next week, we'll start with a new 50 grand as of July 1.
Okay. Oh, that's great then. That's good. So that means we have to spend our 50, right?
Yeah,
okay.
that's why Tim said you have to get it under contract and get creative with invoices. That's why we don't want to delay either, because you don't want to have to turn money back in, basically.
Well, that's good. So
unused.
UTIL is our only candidate, right? So we might as well just approve it now. We have no, it's not like we're making a choice here. UTIL is the only person that responded and we have the only one proposal,
Correct.
right?
And I do think we need to move forward so we can get somebody under contract.
I think as long as we can continue to refine the scope and the schedule, I'm perfectly happy to move forward tonight.
So can I have is there a motion?
All right, I'll make a motion to recommend that the select board engage UTIL on behalf of the planning board to develop MBTA zoning per their proposal and to continue to work with the planning department to finalize the scope and schedule.
Wow, nice job, Cheryl.
Wait,
Second.
so they would only work with the planning department for the schedule, not the planning board?
All right, planning board and department.
Great.
Second.
So amended second. Okay, great. All right, roll call on that. Cheryl?
Yes.
I know it's a minor thing.
Question?
Can we just reference the date of their proposal? April 22nd, 24.
Friendly amendment accepted?
Thank you.
Okay, roll call. Sean?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Cheryl?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you. So Tim, get that all set. And then the final item on our agenda for this evening is the East Milton zoning discussion and vote on MAPC contract amendment. Tim, if you want to just open that up.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is just the actual text of the amendment is very, very simple. And then the reasoning behind it is, you know, again, putting together the actual zoning language product. MAPC is confident they'll be able to get that done in the term of the original contract, but they would like additional time to focus on the design guidelines component. And so the request is, you know, to end the contract on November 30th, as opposed to, I believe, June 30th, which is in the original. I think it's a good idea.
I would agree, giving that the time it needs.
I'll make a motion to approve amendment number 1 to the MAPC contract for consultant services for East Milton overlay zoning.
I'll second.
Sorry, Sean, I'm gonna go back and say as dated April 10th, 2024.
I'll second.
Very good.
And this money comes from grants as well, not out of our budget, right?
There is so so there's a portion of it that comes from a state grant, another portion that comes out of the MPIC budget, and then a third portion that comes out of a second grant that we got from the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. So no planning board budget in this one.
Oh, great.
Was that last minute need a match for a grant that the MPIC had a meeting scheduled and was asked to do some time ago now, but that's where it came from.
Yeah, I know I'm going backwards, but I just keep going back to MBTA and the 10% plan and how much money we're gonna have left. And it looks like 30 grand, so it's almost like we can't do anything else. I mean, this is great because it's great, but I don't want to hold up the vote. I'm just thinking this stuff through a little slow. So yeah.
Right, good question. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Correct. So roll call. Cheryl?
Yes.
Maggie?
Yes.
Sean?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And myself, yes.
So Meredith, one
Wait.
more quick thing. I had sent along, it might have been before the last meeting or the meeting prior. In addition to this contract amendment, Josh Fiala had sent along some proposed next steps in terms of getting back in front of the board and kind of talking about, you know, a next kind of public forum. Let's not talk about that now, but maybe a little bit of time, you know, perhaps on the 9th, just to kind of get that all squared away so we can get them booked for the next couple steps in the project.
Hey, does that sound good for everyone?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Anything from anyone else this evening? If not, I just would like to say, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but it's been a pleasure to work with all of you. If I'm here, I hope to be attending on the 9th, but you know, we never know these things. And it's been a wonderful experience, and just thanks to all the residents who have just really come out and been so supportive of this board. So
Yeah,
Well-
and Meredith, I just wanted to say thanks to you for being chair. You know, you're very kind and generous in allowing the residents to speak, and I really appreciate that. You know, sometimes to a fault, but I think it's always good to let the residents speak, and you're always kind and graceful and inclusive. So thank you.
thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, and Meredith, I'd like to say it's been a pleasure serving with you, and it will be a pleasure to continue to serve with you should the residents decide that that's their preference. So wish you the very best tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've been a fantastic chair, Meredith. Thank you. I love your demeanor. I love the way you keep things rolling. And to Maggie's point, just allowing everyone to speak is so important. And you do that, and it's nice to see. And best of luck tomorrow. I have the utmost confidence you'll be in that chair next week.
Oh,
So, Meredith, having served with you for the 3 years of your term, you know, I can thank you for your public service. We all know what it's like, and I know what it's like to chair, and you've done it for 2 years. So, so thank you. I appreciate all of your contributions to the board.
thank you all very much. Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Let's just-
adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, okay, roll call. Cheryl,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Good evening, all.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.